Hey guys, hope everybody's been doing well. In today's video, I wanted to discuss a rumor over at CanonRumors.com. Supposedly they have a good source that told them that Canon is planning to come out with a EOS R APS-C camera at the second half of 2022. Also, it will be sporting a BSI, which is backside illuminated sensor, giving it a little bit better high dynamic range, lower light, and Canon really typically don't use BSI sensors. I can't think of any camera that they're using a BSI sensor in. So that's good to see that they're coming back up to the standards of other manufacturers. So what is this? This isn't like breaking news. Canon's been dropping hints and statements that they plan on making an APS-C camera or cameras in this new RF mount in the EOS R body. So it's more of like a timeline setting. I mean, some people had speculated 2021, others 2022, and this is kind of confirming or aligning with that in mid 2022. But what does this all mean, right? So I've seen multiple videos, some just reporting the news, other giving a couple speculations. I put a few things together that I want to kind of go over with you guys. And you know, this news was about a week old, but again, I really wanted to kind of think about it a little bit. What does this mean for the consumers? What does this mean for Canon? And is there any concerns that we should be thinking about? So let me jump over to my notes here. So my first concern really is, what will the timeline look like for APS-C glass? If we see any at all. A couple people are doing videos saying that Canon may take a different approach this time. Their legacy lens mount, the EF/EF-S mount, they had one mount, just like the Sony E mount, but they shared two different lines of glass or lenses. You had your full frame lens, which is usually bigger, and it used that full mount. And then you had the APS-C, which tend to be much cheaper. And then again, they didn't use as much glass. The mount was the same, but it was designed for the opening, the sensor of the APS-C. Again, Sony does it, Nikon's been doing it for years. That works. Canon kind of for years, they took a different path with the M mount. I think they named it M mount, was the mirrorless. They tried to take an approach to try to make a smaller lens, smaller mount for a smaller camera, mirrorless APS-C cameras. It didn't really get the love from Canon. I don't know if it wasn't popular with the consumer market. I had a Canon M50 with the about 3 M mount lenses. They were all great. They didn't have a whole lot of lenses to choose from. They just really didn't put that effort. So I think Canon has been planning this for many, many years. They needed something to get their foot in the market in the mirrorless scene, but they didn't want to make a huge investment just to go a different direction. So I really think that they've been planning this for a while. I personally think, not only do I think they are going to come out with APS-C glass, I think they have to. If you look at what do we have right now, right? 3 years, I looked it up, the EOS R, which is their first full frame mirrorless camera that got launched. Now, they did have mirrorless cameras prior, but they were in the M mount. So 3 years was the first camera with the new RF mount, which is huge. It was designed to maximize that full frame sensor. But 3 years, what do we have? We have beautiful L mount or L glass, which is their top tier professional lenses. I mean, they're fantastic, best in the industry. And if you look at how much it cost, it's really comparison to some of the other OEM manufacturers like Sony and Nikon for their top tier glass. But for most of us common consumers that are, you know, weekend warriors, it's pretty expensive. And one of the things that was awesome about Canon and their EF mount, they had a plethora of OEM, their lenses, multiple different levels. They had the L glass, which was their top tier. They had like a gold one, they had a silver one, and they had a couple different levels of their plastic ones. They had some uber cheap stuff and some mid-grade type of STM plastic lenses. Optically, they were all pretty good. I mean, some had some challenges, but for the most part, optically, they were all pretty good, just depending on the motors and how fast, or you know, what was the maximum aperture. But they had a ton of great options, affordable great options, as well as third party. You knew if Tamron made a lens, they made it in the EF mount. It was just, you didn't have to even check, you didn't have to wonder, they made it. Same thing with Sigma and all the others. So There's a reason why people made adapters for all these, video cameras and other type of cameras for the EF, Canon EF, because there is like mountains of different lenses. So again, 3 years, where we at? 3 years a long time. Where are we at? We have great L glass, but there's still a lot of holes in that. If you look at their lens lineup, there's still some gaps, but normal gaps. But the consumer range, there's no third party. Well, with the exception of these little one-off companies, which I wouldn't be interested in. No Tamron, no Sigma. I'm sure there will be soon, but again, 3 years. I don't know if it's a licensing for their new mount or what, because it shares the same focusing logic because you can use a straight through adapter. So what is the APS-C glass going to look like? Are we going to wait 3 more years, or are we going to be forced in buying some of their, cheaper, air quotes, STM glass that, in my opinion, is overpriced? I mean, a lens that typically they would sell an EF mount is like, from $300. You'll see it at $400 for the RF mount. And it's no better in quality. There's no better in performance. It's still the same logic and the same same engineering. So that's kind of concerning. Are they, going to release 10, 15 lenses at the startup of this camera announcement? I doubt it. And I think there's speculation that this will be a Pro Series APS-C camera, and it'll be called the R7, and it'll be like the follow-up of the 7D. If you guys don't know, the Canon 7D was their APS-C Pro body. So if you think of a 5D Pro full-size body, this was the same body, but it had an APS-C sensor. Speculation is this will be the R7 in the R6 body, and again, have the Pro features like the R6, which the R6, I think the R6 is coming at about $2,500 right now. I'm sure you probably catch it on sale, not with the whole thing going on with chip shortage and everything else, just supply shortage. But $2,500 is the retail on that camera. So APS-C, my guess is they're coming to target Fuji, some of the Sonys. They want to put a place in that $1,500 range. So I think it'll have a good IBIS. I think it'll have a lot of things that we want. I'm an APS-C shooter with Fuji. To really compete with Fuji and others in that APS-C market, knowing that people will, at $1,500, they probably will buy that full frame glass, or they'll get an adapter and use their other lenses because, the adapters work good. They're straight through adapters, and there is a crazy amount of cheap, good APS-C glass out there. So if you're wanting to do like, video shooting, if I was wanting a dedicated video camera, I would be really interested. I mean, I like shooting Fuji, but when it comes to video in IBIS, if this looks as good as what they're doing in their R6s, and again, we have a smaller sensor and more room to dance around, so it probably will even be better with IBIS. And it has to have IBIS, guys. Some people say, it probably won't have IBIS. It has to. All the other cameras that it's going to come and compete with have IBIS. So big concern for me is APS-C glass, but as long as they get it out there for about a year, because people like me and others, I think, would use the adapter, especially if you're already deep in the Canon APS-C lens camera family, if you will, in their system. So just kind of concerned about what they've done with the full frame so far. The large mount makes for a bigger camera, question mark. When I first heard this, I thought, oh God, what's this gonna look like? Yes, okay, it's in an R6 body, so we have a full frame camera in an APS sensor in a full frame camera. Okay, that's cool. But what about all the smaller cameras? I did make a video about the Fuji saying comparing full frame to a Fuji XT series, there's not much of a difference. And somebody made a comment, and they had a great point, and I agree that if you're comparing something like a Fuji to a Sony full frame, there's not much difference. But there are many, many, many small options out there for APS-C format. I mean, if you look at the XT30, the Canon M50, I could go on and on. So for size, I thought, how is this huge RF mount, and it is a very big mount, how is that going to work in the small camera? It's going to make these small cameras huge. It's going to look weird. So I found this site. I don't know how accurate this is, but I found this site, and it compared the two cameras based on specs, and supposedly it's an accurate scaled, side by side. And on the left, I chose the RP because although it's a full frame, it is their lighter, more consumer grade camera. And as you can see, hopefully you can see that, the sensor, you can see it fills that RF mount. Now, you can see how that mount is bigger, and I don't know if you could see it too good on the video, but you have that smaller sensor. But just picture this side by side, the M50 with, and I don't think they might go this route, but I think they'll go the RP mount with the APS-C. Obviously, they have to keep the same size of the mount, but I think they'll shrink the camera even more to maximize the real estate of the camera, meaning shrink it down to make it smaller for more consumer. Now, I don't think they'll do this for their initial launch. I think they'll reuse the R6 body, but as they go forward, they're going to have to come out with solutions for that beginner entry-level camera. So I think it'll be a cross between the M50 and the RP, meaning that it'll be smaller, lighter, the mount will be bigger, and I think they'll lose the flash. Possibly, I mean, that's why you have that bump on the M50 as the flash. It's kind of worthless. I'd like to see them get rid of that. But as you can see, side by side, it's very close. And then if you look at the weight, 485 grams on that full frame RP to the M50, which is 390. So again, the RP is heavier, but not by much. If they shrink it a little bit, make it a little lighter, I think, again, I was happily surprised by that. I thought it would be substantially bigger. So let's take a look at comparing the Canon R6 to the 7D, if this thing will even load. I guess this is what happens when you make videos. Something's bound to happen. It's not loading, but essentially what it was is side by side, the Canon R6 was quite a bit smaller. And I guess it's no surprise comparing a DSLR to the 7D, or a 7D, which is a DSLR, to the mirrorless lineup. It's also the R6, which again is full frame, but if it's speculated to have the same sensor, I expect the weight and the size to be the same. And this isn't loading, but the R6 was lighter and it was smaller, so that was good to see. The other thing, let's get back into my list. So as far as the larger mount goes, I think they can do that. Yes, it'll make a portion of the camera smaller, but the new styles of the EOS R system, I think it'll look good. I think it'll work out great for them. The other thing is I kind of toss around, okay, with all of these affordable full frame cameras, especially with Canon, they're supposed to come out with even more. The RP is like $1,000. There's speculation that it'll go down in price, and there's also going to be possibly a version 2. So you're talking like $1,000 full frame. Can they come out with a $1,500 pro body APS-C camera? And this one I kind of thought about a little while, and like, how does that make sense? It doesn't initially if you just say full frame to APS-C, but you really have to compare apples to apples. The new APS-C sensor, I would assume, would be on a top tier, right? We're talking on the capabilities of the R6 and R5 level. So those cameras are $2,500, $3,500. So you're going to get that same low light quality. Again, in comparison, it's not going to be like for like because we're talking APS-C to full size, but I think you will get a higher quality sensor in at that $1,500 range. So the benefits of that is, historical. We got to think when we talk about pro camera is, do we need an APS-C anymore? So as far as that price goes, $1,500 in APS-C, and those are my estimates compared. Why would I get that over a $1,000 RP? So what I think they'll do is, instead of targeting their legacy APS-C pro body users, so legacy who used the Canon 7D, It was wildlife, bird photographers, right? What they wanted, we're talking about 8 years ago, you had megapixels on the full frame cameras and the 24 megapixel. That was a lot of megapixel back then, right? So in order to get longer range out of your lenses, you might have a 300 millimeter lens or a 400 millimeter lens, and you could shoot with that full frame sensor camera, that body. Let's say it's a Canon 5D, which a lot of people use for pro wildlife people. So you have a 5D Mark II, Mark III, but you want to get more reach. You know, you have a 20, and I don't know what it was, 22 megapixel. I forget what the Canon 5D Mark II was. And you wanted to get a further reach. So you'd pull out your 7D, and it was also a 20 some megapixel sensor, but now you got 1.5 times reach. So that 400 millimeter lens is now a 600 millimeter lens. Great optical quality still, and you didn't have to crop. So you have the crop on the sensor, but you didn't have to reduce the image quality. So the bird people historically have been wanting the pro bodies, but in the APS-C format, right? So now we're going to see a shift, because if you're a 5D whatever shooter, which would be comparison to an R5 shooter, why would you need this camera? You don't, because we're talking 45 megapixels now, right? We're talking 40, I think the R5's 48, 45, 46 megapixel. And most cameras have a crop, and I can't remember exactly if the R5 had a crop option. So you can crop or just crop later, because you have those megapixels, you have that option to crop afterwards or in the camera. So to me, it's not really needed anymore for wildlife. And also for wildlife, some of the high-end cameras, the super uber expensive cameras, are becoming stacked sensor. Crazy fast readout. You can do crazy fast burst on e-shutter. So it just makes more sense, I think. And I'm not a bird wildlife photographer, but if I was getting into it, I would look at one of the top tier full frame, stacked sensor cameras. You get the best of both worlds. And most of those guys are really spending the money anyway. But we're talking a $1,500 camera, and if you're still like into wildlife and you're a consumer base, so yes, that would work for people. That you have this camera, you still get some better reach, and it's more of a affordable option. But I think the bigger sell would be in video. They know people are buying these cameras, and video, you don't need a big sensor. You need good IBIS. You need a camera that doesn't overheat. You need all these other things that is optimized on the APS-C format. And you got a lot of people, like the Panasonic with the GH cameras. You got Fuji again, you Sony. They're all buying these cameras to shoot video. Video is getting more and more popular. They know this. So I think that pro body isn't a pro body just for wildlife. And yes, you can use it for obviously wildlife, especially if you're not wanting to get a whole lot invested as far as the big expensive cameras. But I think their bigger push is going to be to compete on that video, moderately priced prosumer video. So that's my take on that, guys. Photography too. I think this will be good photography, but I think they really want to start capitalizing on that video, because Canon's got good bones. They have great autofocus in video. It's one of the best, and they have like the best IBIS as far as capabilities. I mean, they don't have an IBIS right now in APS-C, but if you see what they're doing in full frame, nobody has been able to replicate it. So very, very hopeful that this thing is going to knock it out in those categories. So moving on, I talked about a couple of these things. Entry point. So what they don't have, and they had in the EFS to EF, is you had people go into Target and Sam's Club. That's my first camera ever. That was my entry point, was into Canon. I don't know if it was 15 years ago. I walked into Sam's Club. We had a son. I don't know if it was just being born or he was a couple years old. They had a clearance on a T3 with the kit lens. I picked it up, and it was my introduction to cameras. I then since bought, I don't know, 3 or 4 Canon cameras before I went to Sony and then to Fuji. And I would have bought I would have kept buying Canon if they would have had a mirrorless camera. When I switched, they didn't even have a mirrorless camera. So you know, you get your new customers in early. You know, you have them build up their system, their lenses, their flashes, and all of that stuff. And I don't know what it is. It's brand loyalty. It's what you know. It's what you're comfortable with. The menu systems. Just like driving a Chevy truck versus Ford. So you know, maybe what your dad or grandpa drove, or what your first car was, and you have those memories of it and that comfort level for it. People don't like to switch brands often, and it's important to get people in that entry point, that $300, $400, $500. I took a picture. Let me see if I can find it. I took a picture. The other day, I was walking through Target. Here's what they had. They had 2 Canon cameras, DSLRs. This is a T7. That's their entry-level Rebel. $450 with a lens. That's crazy cheap, right? And over here, we got the T6i, which does higher video and everything else, at $900. Again, I believe that one was also with the lens. So you're talking about cameras with a kit lens that are interchangeable lens cameras, $450 to $900. But, you know, everywhere, all the big box stores, and people get into a system. Photography becomes a hobby. Like me, you grow, you find out what else is out there, you upgrade your lenses. It's your first step. Then you realize you want this or that in another body, and you keep on buying within that system. So it's huge. It's huge for profitability, and that is the reason why I don't think Canon can just have their full frame glass. I think they have to come out with RF mount glass, native glass, because although people like me, or if you're out there watching this video, if you are into cameras, I would buy an adapter. If Canon had a camera like this for $1,500, it's great in video and all that cheap, and that's kind of why I think it's awesome. It's IBIS, but also that cheap, awesome EFS Canon glass that is just out there like dime a dozen. We're talking like brand new 10 to 18s with image stabilization for like $100 to $125. Just awesome, awesome glass. So if you want to get a new customer in, they're not going to buy an adapter. You got to have these packages, as you've seen in there. You got to have, you know, options for people. You can't just have a body and say, yeah, go, you know, here's $400, $500 body, because they have to be priced at entry level, anywhere from $400 to $800, some type of entry level camera. And you can't say, yeah, go ahead and spend $500 on a lens. People are going to like walk away. But you throw a cheap kit lens, you throw a few cheap options out there, and then they start upgrading within your camera system. So it's very important if they want to succeed. That is one of the reasons why Canon has the user base. Nikon, or again, reason that people have, you know, shoot Nikon, and Nikon has such a user base still, is because of those legacy users. And I know people that have shot in Canon. I work with this lady, a great person. She shot Canon since photography school. She's retired now, and I don't know if she looks at anything else but Canon. She's got, you know, always upgrading to the, you know, higher levels, and she had a 7D Mark II, I think it was. I think that was the latest one, full frame. But it's very important for the future of the camera company platform. I already talked about all these things. So to summarize, I think we have to see affordable, high quality APS-C cameras with great lenses and cheap lenses that do great video, autofocus, IBIS, and they don't overheat. And I think we will. Based on everything I said, I think that's the direction Canon's going. They're a smart company. I think that they only have one path if they want to really knock it out of the park. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Do you agree with me? Do you think something else? Are you kind of getting excited about this camera? Please leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.